Hello, welcome to an episode of Going Green. I'm your host, Kathleen Harvey. This growing season is almost over, and with it, the big box stores and local nurseries will be getting rid of their plants and selling them at some very good clearance prices. But is it really worth it? Today, I'm going to give you some hints and tips to help you make that decision, and hopefully a wise one, so that you can get a bargain and not just throw your money away. So let's get started. First off, what kind of plants did you find on sale? Are they annuals? An annual is a plant that will bloom all summer long, but the frost is going to kill it. Considering that frost isn't that far off, is it really worth it for you to buy an annual that's going to die rather soon? That's one thing to think about. Second of all, the plant itself. Where does it need to go? What kind of siting does it need? Does it need sun? Does it need shade? Can you provide the type of conditions it will need? If it's a tree or shrub, it will get bigger if it survives. So do you have the room to make it grow? Some things to think about. So I found these blueberry plants at my local big box store. I'm sure they've been sitting out since spring is really the best time to plant them. But these poor guys weren't purchased, and they've been sitting all summer long out in the garden center, being ignored, not being watered except for what Mother Nature, I'm sure, provided it. So how did I make the decision to buy? One thing I looked at were these stems are still green. There are some dead stems on here, lots of dry brown leaves. These leaves are going to die. They can't come back. They're too far gone. But consider it's fall, so they're going to fall off and go dormant soon anyway. So what I want to look for are green stems and a good root system. So the first thing I'm going to do, put gloves on, always wear gloves, take my handy pruners, and I'm going to prune off all of this dead brown stuff and see what I have left. Okay. So we're getting, and make sure when you prune, if you're pruning a stem that's part green and part brown, make sure you prune until you get some green. Always make sure you get all of the dead part off, just in case there was a fungal infection. And continuing to take these dead parts off so we get rid of all of the brown stuff. One other thing to note, when I purchased these plants, this plant had been sitting outside probably for the whole summer with very little attention. So the soil was bone dry and rock hard. If you plant it just like that, chances are it's not going to survive. So what I did was soak it in an inch or so of water. So if you have a bucket or a wheelbarrow, anything handy, even a pot will do, and soak it anywhere from an hour to 24 hours. Don't let it sit for a week or you'll actually drown and smother the roots. But letting it sit for some time and soak up some water will give it a better chance at survival, because that soil is so dry that if you don't water it before you plant it, it's going to have a much more difficult time taking up sufficient water to get the roots going again. Because in the fall, plants are focusing on getting ready to go dormant for the winter, which means they're paying less attention to their tops and more attention to their root ball. So the next thing we want to do is grab some compost out of the compost bin to amend the soil. So what I'm going to do is take some of this nice, fresh compost from all of the things, all my kitchen waste and leaves and things. If something is not fully decomposed, I just shove it aside and leave it in there and look for all of this nice, wonderful soil that will add natural nutrients back into the plant. So what I'm doing is grabbing some of this nice compost, and I'm going to mix it at a ratio of about 50-50. 50% compost mixed with 50% of what we refer to as mineral soil, which is the natural soil in our area. Now, if your soil is very, very sandy and it's difficult to retain water, you want to add a little bit higher percentage. On the other hand, if your soil is mostly clay, which some of ours is, then you want to do the opposite. You want to add less compost and maybe add some peat moss. And here is a wonderful earthworm that I throw into the soil. They nest and multiply, and they help to further break down the compost even more rapidly. So these are a wonderful sign for your soil. Anytime you see these, don't hurt these. They actually tunnel, so they help to aerate your soil. And when you put them in your compost bin, they help to break down the compost much more rapidly. So I'm going to put him back and tell him to go back to work. There we go. Okay, so now we have our compost. The next thing I'm going to do, because these are blueberry plants, some plants like blueberries, azaleas, camellias, and rhododendrons prefer a more acidic pH to their soil. So what I'm going to do is take my compost and I'm going to add some fresh used coffee grounds to it. When I drink my coffee in the morning, instead of throwing the coffee grounds away, I save them for my acidic loving plants, in this case blueberries. So when I plant them, I'm going to add it to the soil mixture, lower the pH, make it more acidic, which will make the plants happier and enable them to take up nutrients a little bit better. If you're not sure of whether your plants that you have in your yard are acidic loving or not, because some are not. Peonies, for example, are the opposite. They prefer an alkaline soil. Just look it up on the internet. It's a handy-dandy reference tool for the younger generation. And you can find out whether your plant is an acid lover or an alkaline lover. And that'll help you determine the soil amendments that you can put in there to help your plants along. So, let's go plant. Coffee grounds I saved from a couple days of drinking coffee. So I just have filters. I'm going to take these, dump the coffee grounds in here, and then the filters themselves will go back into the compost bin because they're a paper product and they will decompose. And I'm adding my coffee grounds into my compost mixture. And I'm going to stir it all in and mix it very, very well, so it's all evenly distributed, or as well as I can get it. And we'll use this mixture when we plant. See how the soil is all nice, it's moist, it's not sopping wet, and it's flaky without being clumpy. That's exactly what you want. A nice, good, healthy soil. And if you'll notice, I know you can't on TV, but when you compost your soil, if you take a look and smell it, it smells like soil. It doesn't smell like garbage. See, I can put my nose up against it and it doesn't smell, it doesn't stink. If you compost properly using the proper ingredients in the proper proportions, your soil is not going to stink like garbage. It's only when you put garbage by itself in a non-porous container that you get what's called anaerobic decomposition, which is just a fancy way of saying that it creates too much of the wrong kind of bacteria, and that's what makes it stink. But if you mix your compost, just like any recipe, in the proper proportions with the proper ingredients, you get wonderful, rich, healthy, organically grown soil. Now that we have our plants all prepared and ready to go, the next most important thing is siting, which means where do these need to go to make them happy? In the case of blueberry bushes, that not only do they want acidic soil, but they want full sun. So I'm going to put them on the sunny side of my yard. These will also need a lot of room to grow. So I need to make sure that they have enough room to spread and produce lots of blueberries. So let's go find a good spot. Now what I did was place the plants first so that I can make sure, since I'm planting 2 of them, I want to make sure that they're equidistant from the plants that they're going to be surrounding, so that they're balanced in the garden design and that they both have enough room to grow. It's not sunny out today, but this is a sunny part of the yard, and they're going in the back because they're going to get tall. This way I can still put shorter things like daylilies and heucheras and coral bells, things like that, in the front. So let's get started on planting the first one. So the first thing that we do, now that we have them both sited, is we start to dig a hole. And we want to make sure that we dig a hole at least twice as wide as the plant that we're going to be planting, and a little bit deeper than the hole is. Also, as you're digging, make sure that the hole is not shaped like a bowl, but more shaped like the pot. Your hole should be shaped straight down, not curved in, so that you have plenty of room for the roots to spread. Okay, so I've rounded the hole and I've dug it. Is it deep enough? The best way to test it is take your plant still in the pot and simply plop it in the hole and see how deep it goes. Now, you can see where this is. Right now, the pot is slightly below the soil level. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want, because the first thing we want to do is put some of that compost in the bottom so that the new roots, as they come out, will have something nice and soft and fluffy and easy to spread out into. You don't want to have it to have a hard time spreading its roots into the surrounding soil until it gets well established. That's why the hole needs to be bigger than the pot. So now that we've got a hole that's a good size, we want to get some of our compost. So I'm taking my compost and I'm just going to layer it just a little bit in the bottom. Test the pot again. So the pot should, when it's at the proper height, be just slightly above the soil level. So the soil level here in the pot should be just slightly above, and by slightly I mean an inch or less, because the plant's going to settle over time. So just a little bit above the existing soil level. So I add a little more and test it again. There, that looks good. So now we take it out of the pot, and this pot, the roots are a tight mass, extremely root bound. And I know this looks harsh, but what I'm actually doing is gently tearing the roots apart a little bit and spreading them, and soaking it overnight will help to make this plant easier to tear apart. You see how this plant is now saturated, whereas when I first brought it home from the store, it was bone dry. So I'm slightly pulling this apart, just gently tearing the roots a little bit to encourage it to grow. Tearing out any roots, any weeds that might have grown during the summer. Now we want to situate it so that it's visually attractive. Let me see, let me check and see. For spacing and positioning, you want to make sure your plant is straight up and down and visually appealing to you, which means, to me, the taller branches go in the back and the shorter ones go in the front. So the plant is going to grow this way, away from your neighbor's fence, as it continues to grow in the spring. Now, you simply pour some of the compost around. Down at the root level. And then we top it off with the mineral soil, which is the native soil that you dug the hole out of. If there are any weeds in the area, I prepped this area before we got started, but if there are any weeds in the area, you want to rip them out in advance before you start digging. missed one. Otherwise, the roots and the weeds are going to be competing for the very same nutrients out of the soil. So this way I've cleaned the area, it's clean soil, we have some good nutrients in there, some nice compost, and it's pushed down gently but firmly to get rid of all of the air pockets. And then the next thing I'm going to do is water this in. But you don't want to feed it this time of the year because you don't want to encourage new growth that will only die back when frost hits. So you wait till next spring to fertilize. You fertilize in the spring, but you water deeply now and just make sure it gets sufficient water until frost comes. That's all there is to it. Good luck with your plants. I'm Kathleen Harvey. This is Going Green.